Hi everybody, this is Stephen Pugh of the Home Bible College. I wanted to just let the previous video be brief because I wanted this next section, how to study a Bible passage, I wanted that to be all in one video. So this is how to study the Bible number 4. Now, the questions we need to be asking ourselves are numerous, but let's talk about them. How does this passage under consideration fit into the whole book? Now, as I said previously, you will have already divided your book up into the various passages. You'll have numbered them and named them. But the question you've got to ask yourself first is, how does this passage fit into the whole book? And for every single book of the Bible, the answer to that question will be different. And for every passage of the Bible, the answer to that question will be different. Now, the next stage, we're going to be asking ourselves 4 simple questions. The first question is, what does the passage say? It's what I call observation. What can I see? The second stage is correlation, is what does the rest of the Bible say about this passage or about similar subjects this passage contains. The next stage is interpretation. What does the passage mean? And lastly, application. What does this passage mean to me today? So I'll just go back over those 4 again. First one is observation. What do I see? What does the passage say? Okay. Second one, what does the rest of the Bible say in relation to this passage? Thirdly, what does the passage mean? And fourthly, what does it mean to me today? So let's look at the first one. The first one then is observation. What does the passage say? And the question we need to ask is, we're going to be looking at in 3 stages. We're going to be looking at the passage as a whole. We're going to be looking at the sentences one by one. And we're going to look at the words of the passage as well. But each of these, we're not into interpretation. We're not into application or correlation. We're just focusing on this passage. And we're going to ask ourselves these 3 questions. First of all, what does the whole passage say? And at this stage you might write a passage description. So you might be reading through the passage many times until in the end you're going to write down a sentence. It may be brief. In fact, brevity is always a good thing. But you're going to write a description of what the passage is saying. Okay? The second point is you're going to make a note of what does each sentence say. So you're going to have to find out where the sentences start and end. And of course, if you see a full stop, then you'll know that that's the end of a sentence. And what I tend to do when I'm looking at a passage, not only have I numbered the passage, but I've also numbered the sentences. So in a particular passage, when I'm preaching, for example, I'll often talk about sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3. Now, the reason why I focus upon sentences is because a sentence is a whole, complete thought. And if you go to Paul's epistles, you'll discover that very often a sentence may stretch over a number of verses. So if you're going to study it verse by verse, it sort of throws you out a bit. Study the whole sentence from beginning to end. Work out what's the subject of the sentence. Work out what's the predicate of the sentence. Work out what's the main noun of the sentence, and so on. These are interesting things. The other thing about the sentences is that a structure to the sentences. Do the sentences follow a particular structure? Now, this is in itself an absolutely fascinating concept. Very often in the Bible we have what's called an introversion, and in a particular passage we will have point number 1 And when you get to the very end of the passage, you'll find point number 1 repeated or maybe inverted in a different form, but the two are related to one another. And then you'll find point number 2, sentence number 2 sometimes, and that will relate to a point near the end of the passage that just comes just before the last point, and that will also be related to point number 2. So you can understand you've got 1 and 2, and at the end of the passage you've got 2 and 1. And then you might discover, and this very often is the case, that the central point of the whole passage is actually in the center of the sentences, and you might either have 2 or just 1 sentence. Now, the whole subject of sentence or passage construction is an absolutely fascinating study all in its own right, but I highly recommend that you have a look at that and talk to me because this is very interesting. The next question is, we've looked at the passage as a whole, we've looked at the sentences and how they fit together and whether there's a structure to the sentences. We now look at the last thing, which is the words. Now here we need to be very careful that we are able to determine the exact meaning of the words. We need to remember first of all that the Bible wasn't written in English, and that we need to then go back to the Greek. But with an interlinear Bible, which is Greek and English together, it's possible to get back to the original words. And for this, you'll need to have a Greek dictionary. Don't worry, you don't have to learn Greek, but you're able with a Greek dictionary to be able to compare the English and the Greek, and you're able to dig deep and find out what is the original meaning. So this is all about observation. This is all about looking to see what the passage says. Now the next stage we need, and most people miss this stage out, I have to say. Most people do. It's what I call correlation. Now correlation is answering the very simple question. I mean, in the previous one, observation, we asked the question, what does the passage say? Now in correlation, we ask the question, what the other passages in the Bible say about the same words or subjects. Now, some of you may have a Bible that has cross-references. A cross-reference, they're usually in the margin, down the center, or maybe at the side, or at the bottom, and they will have little references. So it'll say it's talking about Jesus Christ. It'll say number 2, and you'll go to number 2, and you'll find there's a reference. When you look up that reference, you'll find that that also is talking about Jesus Christ. They may give you a whole list of references. They all will lead you into other parts of the Bible which often deal with the same subject. Now, cross-referencing is a very interesting and fascinating study all in its own way. And there is a Bible called the Thompson Chain Reference Bible. Now, I highly recommend you get a hold of one of these. The Thompson Chain Reference Bible, it will suggest in the margin a verse. When you go to that verse, it will then suggest to you another verse. And when you go to that one, it will then suggest another verse. And it will take you right through the Bible, and then will eventually bring you back to the one where you started. This is called chain references. And this is fascinating. It's very interesting that the Bible is not just individual books that stand alone. The Bible is actually a collection written under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and it all relates to each other. It all relates. So correlation is a very important point, and it answers the question, what do other passages of the Bible say about the same words or subjects? So we've talked at two stages of study. The first is, what does the passage say? The second is, what does the rest of the Bible say? Now the third stage is interpretation. So at this stage, we're not asking the question, what does it say? We're asking, what does it mean? What does it mean? So in order to do this, we need to ask ourselves 3 questions. First of all, who was the writer originally writing to? Now we're digging deep into the passage. We're not just asking, what does it mean to me today? We're asking, hang on a minute, what did it mean to the original writer? Who was this person? Okay, and who are they writing to? The next question is, what did the writer originally mean by what he said? Wow, now that's the study, isn't it? That's getting into the passage. You see, we can't interpret what the passage means until we find out who the writer was and who he's writing to and what he's originally trying to say. Third thing is, what did the readers originally understand by what was written? And fourthly, in what way can this passage be understood today? I don't mean how is it applied today, that's much later. How do we understand the passage today? Okay, how do we understand it today? Now, so we've done 4 stages. We've got observation, which is what does it say? We've got correlation, which is what does the rest of the Bible say? We've got interpretation, which is what does it mean? Now, all of these stages are fairly academic so far. But now we're going to come to the important bit. And the important bit is application. And now we're answering the question, what does it mean to me? It's not just what does it mean, but what does it mean to me today? So in this particular stage, we ask, how did the passage apply to its original readers? Okay, how did it apply to the original readers? Okay. Secondly, in what way could it apply to us today? And thirdly, for those of you that are preachers, in what way can this passage be applied to your listeners? Okay? In what way can the passage be taught? So let's just recap. This is intensive Bible study, isn't it? And it takes a great deal of clarity of thinking. First question is correlation. The first question is observation. What does the passage say? Second one, correlation. What does the rest of the Bible say about this passage? Thirdly, what does the passage mean? Interpretation. What does it mean? And fourthly, application. What does it mean to me? Now, years ago, I very often would use coloured pens. So if I was writing about what the passage says, then I would use black. Okay. If I was writing about what it says in other places, I would use green. If I was talking or writing about what does it mean, I would use blue. And if I was talking about its application, then I would write in red. Now there's just a little tip. If you like coloured pens, then that's something that's really interesting. Okay, so this is it. This is what intensive Bible study is. It's about thinking. It's about thinking in very specific ways about the passage and how it works and how it fits together. Now, you may have lots of questions, and that's fine. Come back to us. We'd love to answer your questions. But I'm interested on what it is that you discover. You will be delving deep into a tremendous mine of information. So enjoy Bible study. Bible study is, I think, the very best thing that any mind could occupy. Well, God bless you. We look forward to catching up with you another day. And bye for now.